You know that feeling when you look at a piece of ancient religious art and you just know there's a huge story there, but it feels like it's written in a language you can't quite read? Well, today we're going to learn the grammar of one of the richest and most complex visual languages out there, Hindu iconography.
I mean, think about it. It's a huge challenge that every single spiritual tradition has had to tackle. How do you give a form to something that is, by definition, formless? How do you represent these enormous concepts like creation or time or divine grace? Well, iconography is the answer. It's a whole system of symbols and stories, all encoded into stone, metal, and paint.
And to guide us on this journey, we're going to be using a kind of Rosetta Stone for the gods, T.A. Gopinatha Rao's Elements of Hindu Iconography. Now, this was published way back in 1914, and it was just a monumental effort to systematically decode these divine images using the ancient scriptures themselves. For us, it's the master key that's going to unlock this whole visual world.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to touch on the basic rules of this visual language. Then, to really see how it all works, we're going to zoom in on one of Hinduism's most complex and fascinating figures, the god Shiva. We'll explore his most abstract symbol, the linga, and then dive into his incredible, sometimes contradictory, manifested forms, from the terrifying to the graceful. And all of that will lead us to our big final question: why? Why the need for so many different faces of the divine?
So let's start with the most important rule of the game. These images are not just statues. They're not just decorations. You have to think of each one as a piece of visual philosophy, a really dense story or cosmic truth that's been captured in a single form. They're not just meant to be seen, they're meant to be read.
And honestly, there's no better case study for this than Shiva. He is perfect for this because his entire being is just a bundle of contradictions. He's a wild, lone ascetic, but he's also a loving family man. He's the god of destruction, but his very name, Shiva, literally means the auspicious one. So the question is, how on earth do you capture a being of such deep, profound paradox in a single image?
And this duality, this is the absolute key to understanding him. On the one hand, he's Ashiva, which means the inauspicious. This is the fearsome, wild ascetic who hangs out in cremation grounds covered in ash. But on the other hand, he is Shiva, the auspicious, the gracious creator, the protector, the devoted husband and father. And it's the tension between these two poles that makes him such a compelling figure.
You can actually see this evolution in his names. In the oldest texts, the Vedas, he's mostly known as Rudra, the Howler, or the Fiery One, a really fierce deity you prayed to mainly to keep him from getting angry. The name Shiva, the auspicious one, gets much more common later on, as the focus shifts to his more graceful, benevolent side. And eventually he earns the title Mahadeva, the great god, which signals his rise to a supreme spot in the whole pantheon.
So if Shiva is this ultimate, contradictory, formless reality, how in the world do you worship him, right? How do you build a temple to something that doesn't have a form? Well, the answer is one of the most powerful, and let's be honest, one of the most misunderstood symbols in all of religion, the linga.
Now, philosophically speaking, the linga is an aniconic symbol. That's just a fancy way of saying it's not supposed to look like a person. Instead, it represents the two fundamental principles of the entire universe. You have the upright form, which is Purusha, that's pure, formless consciousness, raw potential, and its base, the pedestal, is Prakriti. That's the material world, substance, nature itself. You put them together, and what you get is the engine of all creation.
Okay, but where did this symbol actually come from? Rao's research really digs into two competing scholarly theories. One theory connects the linga to the idea of the skamba, this mythical, blazing pillar of fire that's described as the central axis of the entire cosmos. But the other theory, which is backed up by some very early and very realistic-looking sculptures, traces it to the worship of the generative principle itself, known as the Shishnadeva.
And later texts don't shy away from this connection at all. A ritual text by a scholar named Agora Shivacharya just puts it right out there, saying, "I salute Uma, who is in the form of Bhaga, and Shankara, who is in the form of Linga." So this really shows how the symbol was understood as this profound representation of that divine cosmic union that creates and sustains the universe.
Now, beyond that abstract symbol of the linga,
Shiva also shows up in this huge variety of human-like forms, which are called murtis. You can think of each one as being like a different chapter in his grand story, illustrating one specific quality or a cosmic event. Let's look at a few, because they are pretty wild.
Let's start with his destructive forms, the Samhara Murtis. And we're not talking about mindless destruction here. This is about destroying evil to restore cosmic order. In one form, Kalare Murti, he literally kicks Yama, the god of death himself, to save a young devotee. In another, the incredibly fierce Gajasura Samhara Murti, he slays an elephant demon and then dances in ecstasy while wrapped in its bloody, flayed skin. It's intense.
But, and this is so important, for every one of those destructive acts, there's a corresponding act of grace. These are the Anugraha Murtis. As Shandesha Anugraha Murti, he acts like a proud, loving father, placing a garland on a devotee's head. In another amazing story, he grants the super-powerful discus, the Sudarshana Chakra, to the god Vishnu, all as a reward for his incredible devotion.
So all these different aspects, the destruction, the grace, the paradox, they all culminate in what is maybe the most famous and philosophically rich icon in the entire world, Nataraja, the Lord of the Dance. And this isn't just a pretty statue. This is a complete visualization of the entire life cycle of the cosmos.
Okay, so look closely, because his entire cosmic job description is right here in this one dance. In one hand, he holds a drum, beating out the rhythm of creation. With another hand, he makes the fear not gesture, which is a promise of preservation. In a third hand, he holds the fire of destruction, the flame that will one day dissolve everything. Then, his foot is crushing a little dwarf, which symbolizes stamping out our own illusion and ignorance. And finally, his other foot is lifted up, offering grace and a path to liberation for any soul who seeks it. Creation, preservation, destruction, illusion, grace. It's all happening right now, all at once, in this single, timeless dance.
And according to the mystic poet Tirumular, this incredible dance isn't some far-off mythological event. No, it's happening right now. It is the very pulse of the universe. As he put it so beautifully, everywhere is Shiva's gracious dance made manifest.
So, from an abstract pillar of fire to a cosmic dancer, from a terrifying destroyer to a loving father, it all brings us back to one final, really crucial question.
Why? After all that we've just seen, why are there so many forms? Why this incredible, almost overwhelming variety of images? Well, the answer to that is the whole point of this entire visual language.
It turns out the variety is the message. The fundamental idea is that no single image could ever capture something as infinite and as full of contradictions as the divine. So this incredibly rich visual theology gives different paths for different kinds of people. The contemplative yogi has a form to meditate on. The everyday householder has a form to pray to. Each image is a tangible doorway to an abstract truth, a tool that's been carefully designed to help the finite human mind get a little grasp on the infinite.
And that kind of leaves us with a question for our own world, doesn't it? I mean, we are saturated with logos and icons and memes, but what symbols in our modern world really carry this kind of deep, layered meaning? What image today could tell a whole story about cosmic creation, human struggle, and divine grace, all at the same time? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.